man, where do I begin?
It really, really feels like a numbers game. It feels like my application is 1 out of 500.
Right now, I just kind of feel like I'm in this machine.
And you're constantly feeling as if like it's wasting time.
And then when I do hear back, it is almost always that like AI automated, thank you so much, we're not moving forward with your application.
Of course I want to grow. Of course I want to make more money. Who doesn't? I would love to have more of a work-life balance.
It feels like a miracle when you can actually get to talk to somebody instead of just see a pre-written AI message.
Most people don't talk about how demoralizing job hunting can be. I mean, people are really putting their whole identity and their whole lives into these applications, and they're dealing with what would appear as generic job applications, and then they just get ghosted. I think the last friend that I had who was seriously seeking a job did 600 applications, a little over 600 applications before he actually got callbacks. That's kind of the landscape right now, which is crazy, but that's what we're dealing with. That happens, or you do get the interview and the job's nothing like what you thought it would be. It's rough. It's rough out there right now. Because it's so difficult, I think it's important to do what we're doing here. We've been knee deep in this kind of research, talking and asking questions with job seekers about what they're looking for, watching selfie videos, looking at diary style entries, and listening to people describe in really painful detail what it's like to be on the other side of the now hiring signs. And I think part of this show is really going to be about getting uncomfortably honest about what's obvious and what the landscape is, problems that aren't really talked about, and how people look for work, and then how companies look for employees, and everything that falls in between that. I'm a creative director. I work for a company called SkillScout. We got our start and specialize in talent acquisition, and so it gives us, at least from my perspective, a unique lens to talk on this, but we're researching on purpose to have data back up our creative and the directions that we go.
Great intro.
That's right.
I'm just going to dive in. 12 years ago today, Elena Valentine and I started a company with a wild idea and heavy mentorship from Chris Conley to go start something. We worked on a project of how do you connect people to employment in a more human-centered way, and months of research. Really, the big so what is that people don't know what to expect in a job, and companies have a hard time articulating what it's going to be so they find the right people. And that was 12 years ago. And our solution at the time was like, what if we just started filming jobs? And it sort of snowballed and took off from there. And now we work with, everything from mid-sized companies to Fortune 10 companies on solving that problem. And I think, Elena and I both came into this. I'm a psychologist. My background is not in production or creative. But Elena and I both came in as researchers and have maintained a pretty big curiosity around what is it like to look for work. And one of my good friends, he said this about 5 years ago, and it stuck with me, that a job is your highest consideration purchase of your life. It shows, what your lifestyle is going to be, what kind of car you can afford, where you can send your kids to school, how you can support your retirement, the healthcare of your family. Like, it is the big thing. And so we should treat it with such care. So I'm excited about this because we get to dive back into our research roots and understand what it looks like to find a job in 2026, and just bring that empathy and that data into any of the work that we're doing creatively to help companies find the right people. So happy anniversary, Valentine, 12 years.
Yeah, but also it feels like a full circle moment, because at the heart of who Abby and I are just curious people nerds. That's what brought us into this business. And that's what continues to drive us. So the fact that now we can kind of leverage mobile ethnographic research in this way to both inform our creative and also be authentically helpful to the industry as we do it is super exciting.
Yeah, I think something that I love about our creative team is that you guys and all of us, but particularly our creative directors, you guys are really audience obsessed and like trying to get into the heads of the viewer and designing creative that is going to speak to the people in the moment that they're making a decision or feeling or watching something. And so it feels pretty natural that we would make investments and like dive further into that nerding out of like, what is this experience actually like? So I think this is like us learning about our audience, us keeping a pulse on what it's like to be a job seeker. But also we're doing this work as we develop creative ideas. So it feels right to share that out with the community, with the world, because we want everybody to be able to hire better and people to find jobs that can change their lives. And so I think I'm just excited that some of the work we've been doing internally to fuel our own creative and the work we do with clients, we can start to share out so that other people can see it. We can get input and just be good citizens in the industry.
Yeah. And a lot of the core of what we're doing here is these little micro research studies. We're going to call them pulse studies. That's really these periodic things that we put out that are small, ongoing check-in style questionnaires with job seekers and people who are maybe not seeking jobs, but are open to the options. Because there's a lot of really interesting information that we can unpack from that will also inform our creative approach. I'm one of the creative directors. I didn't say that, and I should have, but I'm one of the people who translates that. No,
you have a very aesthetic background.
No, you would never know this from my background. No, what are you talking about?
Not the hoodie or the coffee maker.
Not the hoodie or the coffee maker. I'll have coffee on the next episode in my hand.
Abs, knowing that we've been in this industry, we've seen a lot of research studies. What makes the type of research that we're doing right now different? What feels exciting to us, to you, about the kind of this type of research and what it can offer that we're just like not seeing in the market?
I think that's a great question. So there's two sides to the research coin. There's the qualitative and the quantitative. And I feel like we see a lot of quant studies come out. There's like labor market statistics, big companies and, publishers share like big overall job trends about how many people are getting hired, what's going on, what sectors are hiring. So I feel like the quant is covered by various sources very well. And what I'm always feeling like I have more curiosity or questions about is not the what, but like the why. And that's where qualitative research really comes into play. It's like, okay, we understand this overall trend, but let's unpack like what's behind that so that we can really get into the head and the heart of the audience. And qualitative research is really beautiful at that. And there's a million ways you can do good qualitative research. SkillScout is a market research tool that we know their founder. We came out of the same human-centered design background, and they built a really great ethnographic research tool that allows us to basically conduct ethnography, diary studies, longitudinal studies, and get really rich qualitative data. We can ask people to send us voice memos. We can ask people to submit little videos, and there's so much of the human-centeredness that comes through if you can see a person when they're responding. That I think it just goes way beyond like general qualitative, survey questions. So I'm really geeked about that. I think it gives the team really good, like a dive into the why. And even things like Isaiah and I are doing a discovery project on healthcare providers. And the first thing that we noticed about every single respondent was they were exhausted. Like they were like laying in bed, or they were like, hi. I also love the contrarian stuff like that we learned through some of the videos.
And we have seen firsthand, Abby, how executives, upon really seeing the research and seeing these stories, make pretty dramatic changes in their business and their services as a result. And so that's what excites me, is seeing how we can potentially move the needle on some of these things by folks being able to hear from real job seekers and studies like we're doing.
100%. And I'm so fatigued of hearing all the sessions on like AI optimization. We're going to GAO, we're going to SEO, all of that's fine and great. But I think what's lost when that becomes so trendy to talk about is there's another person on the other side of this, and it's really, really easy to distance yourself from it. And you know, we were early adopters of AI. We've done all the things you can do with AI, for better or for worse, and we've learned where it fits in our process. And I'm obviously a huge advocate of adopting new technology. But I think one conversation that gets, you know, overrun is like, how is AI crushing the human experience of getting a job, which is like a deeply human experience on both ends of it. So yes, I love that we're doing this.
And what it reminds me of is that as leaders, we often forget how emotional we are versus logic. And that there's something to be said about being able to see and hear a job seeker talk about how dehumanizing the process is, what a miracle it is to get a human on the phone or a real human email, versus kind of seeing that in a survey. And that's something that is ringing loud and true even in our, you know, first kind of pulse study. And I would expect that in the subsequent.
And Isaiah, why do you think, because another thing we saw in the data was that Reddit is above all other review sites. So companies pay a ton to be on Glassdoor and have a Glassdoor presence. And there's the same mechanism, like, you know, there can be anonymous reviews of former employees, and you're getting some of the same data, but there's a different level of trust that came from Reddit. Talk a little bit about that. Like, why would you go to Reddit over Glassdoor?
Yeah, I think the origin of Reddit is peer-to-peer information. It's sourced from humans. It was online forums. If you still go to old.reddit.com, you can see that it is a really boring early 2000s looking forum where there's just a drop down of topics that people comment on, but many people comment and use it to interact. The social aspect of Reddit is more information sharing and less personal life sharing, which is what the other social media sites kind of excel at in different ways. Reddit is, how do I source this information from humans who have had the experience with it as much as possible, and how do I dialogue with people who have had that experience if I want to know more? And that's where we get Reddit threads from. Now in our culture, it's getting watered down. Reddit's doing this share selling and AI's involved, and so are bots. But especially when it's compared to the rest of the landscape, Reddit is kind of still viewed as sourced by humans. So it's very interesting, and I'm not trying to say this is like overwhelming how everything is, but because of that perception, because of the human aspect that's behind that motivation, Reddit is viewed as accurate when Google and the other competitors are not, which is a very interesting social perception that we should do another pulse study on.
Interesting. When information conflicts, I have to say it's usually like a Reddit or a LinkedIn. Even LinkedIn, not really. I'll say it's a Reddit, you know, because Reddit is anonymous. You know, it's hard for me to believe someone would be lying, you know, too extravagantly.
And I'm curious, I might be jumping the gun a little, like into process a little bit, but as a creative director, like, what do you do with that information? So what's the so what for you as you're designing creative for companies that are trying to be more authentic?
You got to toe a line, right? Where you're creating this thing for this company because these are the mandates that they need. This is what we have to do. This is what we have to fulfill. But I think there's a little bit of a responsibility on creatives to push back against just this carbon copy narrative. And I don't mean that to be combative, but to push the needle a little bit. I think as we evolve as a culture, it's myopic for us to stay in this same lane of creation, even if it does work, because the culture doesn't stay that way and our humanity doesn't stay that way. And as a species, we just advance. So it's important to be pushing clients past what they're a little bit comfortable with in order to make it more relevant. In my opinion, and you know, like if we view relevancy as a pendulum swing, right? And you'd have our clients and corporations on one end of this. They have their own culture, their own ideas. Many of them have their own language that you have to adopt, and that's how you fit in. And then the pendulum would swing to like pop culture, which is what you see in the headlines, what you listen to every single day when you're not working, what movies you watch, all that kind of stuff. There's this pendulum that swings back and forth, and our job as a creative is to tell the corporate pendulum on this side. There's this other end of the swing. And this is too far. Like, we don't need to be doing avant-garde kind of things in order to attract candidates. But if we swing just a little bit in that direction, you're going to have a bigger pool to pick from, and you're going to have more applicants that want said job because you're doing something that's relevant to where humanity is at instead of what's just relevant to where your corporation is at. And I think that towing that line is really our responsibility as creative directors.
So for context, we used some ethnographic questions to ask a variety of job seekers about their experience. And this was totally like throw spaghetti at the wall. Let's just get a pulse and pilot of how we might start to think about the right questions to ask so that we can design systems that work better. So we've done a couple studies so far, and we're starting to see some themes emerge. I'll talk through all of them, and then maybe we can dive into each of them individually. One big thing that came through on our pilot was how a job seeker is feeling confidence-wise in the process. And if you've ever looked for a job, it can be like the most deflating, most confidence-killing exercise you could possibly do. So when a job or a hiring process inspires confidence in somebody, in the right person, that's a good thing. And so we dove a little bit into confidence. Trust came up as a huge consideration.
Trust was a big one.
Yeah.
As far as what information I trust, if I'm hearing conflicting information, I would say face-to-face interactions with people in that company is by far the best.
Just being able to see other employees that may have worked there in the past, who are able to give their honest 2 cents as to how the company was, whether or not they have any complaints that may be perhaps bothersome for me, like, oh wow, like X, Y, and Z. Oh, this employee said X, Y, and Z thing that happened, and it didn't sound too good.
So what we're hearing from job seekers is that they're not even interested in going online and looking for information. Like, the best case scenario is like, I want to hear from somebody who just quit, or I want to hear from somebody who works at the company now, but not what they're telling corporate. I want to hear it over drinks. And so that started springboarding all kinds of ideas in our mind. It was like, well, if a company is what they say they are, what if we filmed exit interviews, right? People leaving that are like, hey, this was a great company, and here's where it served as this foundational step in my career. Here's what I got from it, and here's where I'm going next. Like, if the companies that had enough gusto to publish stuff like that, put it out, I think they'd get really good results, because it's just being honest about, like, this is where people thrive. You talk to some people who are currently there, you talk to some people who are leaving, and that's going to be a story you can own, and the job seekers are going to think are pretty authentic stories. Well, and the strongest brands are brands that have clarity about what they are and what they are not. And
part.
Yeah, many of our smart colleagues in the industry that we've learned from, like Charlotte Marshall wrote a whole book about, the content that repels people, and that you want to put out content that makes somebody feel something, and that's something that they're feeling should not always be good or attractive. We're not selling products. We're trying to find a right fit on both sides. So it's nuanced in talent brand because of that. But the best brands are the brands who know what they are and know what they are not, and are not shy about saying what they are and are not, and are not, watering it down. They're letting real people speak, and they're letting the real stories come through, whether or not it's the most flattering message all the time. If you work at a startup, take our brand, for example. We're 12 years old, but we still very much operate with a startup mentality. And the hours in production are super long. And Isaiah, you and I know this, and everybody else on our team, there are days where you're on day 7 of a 7-day production, and you've pounded 2 Celsiuses, not you, because you care about your health, but me and Sam have pounded 2 Celsiuses, and it's day 7, and you're like, am I fueled by this, or am I drained by this? And we want to attract the people that are fueled by creating something amazing. And that is not going to be for everybody, but we have to be super honest in what that is, because there's amazing upsides of the work that we do. And if more companies were more willing to be honest about who they are, I think there'd be better fit, and we'd be able to make cooler content that spoke to their audience.
Yeah. The end goal is just to get the right person to the job. And I think finding the right applicants is where you start with that.
One theme that just keeps me up at night is that job seekers are just swimming in a sea of sameness. Like every company is like, we value flexibility and innovation, and like everybody talks about everything the same. And so job seekers, they're starving for differentiation. They're starving for specificity, and they're starving for things that feel like a real person is telling them a real story that they believe and that is believable. So I think the further that we dive in, the more I want to unpack who's doing it really well, because I think there are a lot of companies that are out there that are not just like, we're a family, we're innovative. And James Ellis is on this train and talks about it all the time. And I'm so in the same team. It's like death by 1,000 corporate words, you know?
Oh, man.
And we knew that and we expected it, but to see it and to hear it and experience it is a whole different thing. So I'm hoping that our insights can build upon the great qualitative research that exists now, but kind of bring that dynamic experience outside of like a white paper. Like we want to be able to see and hear and feel it and feel what our audience and our job seekers are going through. And I think video is a great way to do that.
It feels like a miracle when you can actually get to talk to somebody instead of just see a pre-written AI message about how either they're not moving forward with your application or what the next steps are. It takes a little bit of, right now I just kind of feel like I'm in this machine.
Where do the best jobs come from? And that's going to go right back to connections, whether personal or professional, people that you've already established relationships with that are going to get you past the algorithms of resumeing and first round HR and just get you into those second level interviews with the actual managers. That's going to be it.